Can you believe it? We're at almost the halfway point of your 2025 AFL Fantasy season, and we are on the very ledges of hitting the mid-season buys. But what does it mean for you this week with the trades you need to make? Another critical week of decisions to be made. And here at the Coaches Panel, we got you back. We're going to give you our top 10 trade targets for the week. My number one, who am I kicking it off with? Promise it's not recency bias. Nick Martin, off the back of a monster score last week, and he wasn't the only Essendon defensive eligible player that dished up a monster score. But it's what he's been doing over the last month and what's to come from a fixture perspective, both teams they play against and where it sits in our buy structure, that's really critical for me. Around about round 4 or 5, Essendon made a drastic shift. Did you remember that first month of the year? Their ball movement out of the defensive half was diabolical. So many turnovers, so much poor usage, so much return entries. Just they'd get it out of there and it would be back in just as quickly. One of the big structural changes Essendon have made is taking Nick off of a high half forward and wing role to an exclusive wing role with license to roam as deep into defensive 50 and forward 50, almost as he chooses and sees fit. So much so, he takes kick-ins. It's an unbelievably fantasy-friendly, favourable role. He has permission, and as a result of that, and the fact that he's their best ball user alongside Zach Merritt, they do love to get the ball in his hands at any single opportunity. And this game style of Essendon is clearly built on possession retention. It's not a frantic surge the ball cost at any measure. It's much more controlled. And as a result, lots of uncontested possession, lots of uncontested marks, lots of, okay, this wing doesn't look open. We're going to transition it across to the other side and try to create a favourable matchup for us. And as a result, we've seen this weekend was a great hype end of it, but massive mark tallies for Martin, for McGrath, for Pryor, for Reid. They're happy to just move the ball slowly and in a controlled fashion, which is so good for AFL Fantasy. So he's got this favourable wing. He's got this favourable role. He's got a great fixture of opponents coming up, most notably heading into round 11. They've got Richmond, which is going to be a gravy matchup. And where he sits in the bye structure of who's where, it's actually outstanding for us. Then throw in on top of it, he's under $1 million. He probably won't be there for much longer. He's got as good a ceiling as any defender or forward eligible for us. And to that point, what trading into Nick can do for you is it actually opens up the ability for you to almost tap into some draft or daily fantasy style of selections and decisions of, I can upgrade almost in any line I want. I can play the matchup of, okay, is it, I've got a Reid at D7 or a Pryor at D7. I've got a Davidson or a Cleary at F7. I've got a Lindsay at an M9 or whatever it is. You could almost go, okay, I'm going to be able to then now target the upgrade in the line that I want to get this week and get the cash cow on field in the line this week and not feel like I'm a slave to, well, I need to make an upgrade, but it has to be in the defensive line. Therefore, I'll pick the best defender. It is a player like Martin who can play at either end of the ground, opens up your trading options everywhere. So that alone, let alone favourable fixture, favourable role, favourable buy structure for you, to me, it just absolutely screams, I want a piece of Nick Martin. The optimum time was probably about a month ago. You got some really nice scores, but if not, this sits in the spot now after a couple of quiet weeks. He's back. Thankfully, that little niggle that he had, he's come out and said, yeah, I was carrying something for a couple of weeks there, but feeling good now. So my number one trade target this week, Nick Martin. My number two, going to stay in the same team lane. Let's hit downgrades for you. Saad El-Hawli. Already highly owned, 40% of the competition, I think it is, already have their hands on Sard. And so it might not help a big chunk of you watching and tuning in on this episode now, but he was outstanding on the weekend, an 80-plus score, his highest score of the year, well and truly smashed his average and finally started to generate some cash for us. I think importantly, not only does he have a negative break even and that defensive midfield status is important, But given how prolific they were and dominant they were, I'd be really shocked, despite some players coming back into the team, if he was the guy that fell out of squad selection. But it's not all systems go on Sard here. The fact is, he was sub-free in this game, but so much other of his games of football this year have not been. And so there is without doubt some major vest concerns on Sard. So I think he's got a good opportunity to perform. He played well on the weekend, and as long as he continues to do that and Essendon perform well, he's going to be in and around this team's ecosystem. He has speed. He's got good decision-making about him. And he opens up parts of the ground with both of those two skill sets. So I think he's around the mark, but don't be shocked if he cops a vest and just cancels out that cash generation. But if you're looking to reignite it off guys like Moraes, off Davidson, off Cleary, off Lindsay, off any of these guys that you're like, okay, they've basically done their job for us, that's fine. Maybe you wanted to get off a dead rook. Unfortunately, a Hayes sits in that spot or something like that. He's another play there. So to me, he's probably got the best scoring capacity of sort of our sub 350 guys that we've seen at AFL level. But I'm not super confident in it, but I don't feel like this year we're getting the quality of rooks with job security rolling through there. Even guys like a Hustwaite. Well, I know he's not rookie in AFL Fantasy, but we felt pretty confident he was going to be around the mark, and he cops it. That's the worst part of the vest. At least he's priced at a much cheaper spot than what he was. Ready for my number 3 trade target? It's a guy I put on the list for you last week, and if you did, you would have walked out with a really nice 130-plus score, but he's still very, very attainable. My number 3 trade target is Tom Green. Gone up a little bit over that $1 million price point now. Not as much as he's going to over the next couple of weeks, but he's secretly putting together a really impressive season. An average of 106, just the 5% ownership, so unique. Got a really favourable buy, round 16. He's got that last spot premium. He could be an option you could look at as a consideration for captaincy and vice-captaincy, not only just this week gone and this coming weeks, but right throughout the buys, lets you upgrade and improve that team right up until round 16. But just quietly, he's only had the one score all year under 90, and he's already dished up 6 scores of 100 plus, including last week's season high against the Cats. He's been doing it week on week and hasn't really had a big first quarter, but he did on the weekend. We know he's got 40, 50 point scoring quarters within him, and when he puts it all together in 3 of the 4 quarters, you're already laughing with a 110 plus score. To me, he's still very attainable. He's still very unique, and he's very, very reliable. I'm very, very happy to get my hands on Tom Green if I wasn't already an owner. You ready for my number 4 trade target? I'm going to hit downgrade territory for you because for, again, about 40% of the comp, you're like, MJ, Sard might help me if I didn't, but I'm already there. Let's help you with another one. And with the same positional availability, Bo Allen as a defender mid, just over that 300,000. Missed last week due to a suspension, but where West Coast are at the moment is clearly not only the only team that is yet to get a victory, but a team that is trying to develop and learn as much as they possibly can about their list, and that requires giving good high-end talent, which Bo is, every opportunity to succeed. He's had a good chunk of time at the Waffle. He's built his craft. He's given the opportunity. And if it wasn't for the suspension, he would have played last week. So let's take the gift that it is. Not a great average in the 30s, but he's actually more someone that is just going to play hopefully through the buys for you, maybe between now and the end of it, if not thereby. You might be able to extract 100,000, might be as good as it gets. But that's still great because you should also be trying to make some of the cash that he's going to make accessible to you. So I think he's the best, second best option behind Saad El-Hawli to make you some money. I know others looking at a Simpson from Fremantle. I just don't love his job security. I feel like Bo's going to be given every opportunity to have an opportunity to impact the game. So to me, he is my number 4 trade target. And then my number 5. Sometimes you get right eventually. And I may have made the comment during the preseason that it's Peatling season. I think also that might be the name of my fantasy team this year, just quietly. But I think we're on the very ledges of something incredible. My number 5 trade target is James Peatling, priced at just under 800,000, a really attainable break even. And the average doesn't look great of 82, but we actually need to be looking with a bit more of a micro view of what's happened in the last 2 weeks since Matt Crouch has been out of the side. What has had to change is the dynamic of what that centre-bounce presence is and who's in there has changed. In the last 2 weeks, James Peatling has had his highest two centre bounce attendance rates for the year. It's a 64 and a 75%. And as a result, he's dished up a 117 and an 88. And importantly, while this coming week is quite tough for inside mids against Collingwood, is not favourable, the very following week, it is up against West Coast. And again, sits in a nice spot where you could probably make 80 to 100,000 if things go well while Crouch is out for the next month. And all of a sudden, you can move over and jump onto whichever premium forward you want through the buys. Maybe that could be a Jason Horne-Francis. And it only costs you $30,000 in 5 weeks' time, whereas right now it would probably cost you about $130,000. This is the type of move, and you could get quite comparable scoring. So to me, it is a little bit creative. It's a nice little option where you could make a clip of cash off a player like a Caleb Daniel, who should and will be a popular trade target. We've talked about him on our last few strategy session episodes, that the kind of D-Day was coming to get rid of Caleb Daniel. Well, it well and truly arrived after that weekend's performance. Peatling could just be a little bit of cash that is made and accessible, but really it's going to make it up on the other side. There's another option I'm going to share with you soon that could be in that. But I love what Peatling is doing. He's looking good in this Crows midfield. It is a tough matchup this week, but if it's a contested game, that's where Peatling does his best work. I'm still happy to put him in my top 5 trade targets. So it's Nick Martin, it's Saad El-Hawli, it's Tom Green, it's Bo Allen, and it's James Peatling are my top 5 trade targets for the week. You ready for my next couple? All right, let's go. My number 6 is a guy. I also put him on the trade targets last week, but I'm going to put him on notice for you again. Josh Dunkley, knocking on the door of $1.1 million, got a seasonal average of 110, and his break-even's right in that pocket. Again, much like Tom Green, got a really favourable buy, got a pretty good fixture that sits there, and has just not disappointed coaches. I think only 2 scores under 100 all year, nothing under 90, finds a way to score brilliantly. And that's what I love about Josh, is he's not one-dimensional where it has to be contested possessions, or it has to be tackles, or it has to be marks, or it has to be uncontested possessions. He sits beautifully in this Brisbane midfield, where when he needs to play more defensive minded, okay, well, he'll build his score base through tackles and still get that 100+ score. Whether it needs to come through some spread and some uncontested possessions, he gets involved and he does that too. Or if Lachie Neale's getting tagged out of a game like he was on Sunday night against the Roos, well, okay, it's his job to crack in and to win some more of that first touch football. It is one of, if not the most perfect fantasy footballer in the game. He's not cheap at all, but if you want someone that's consistent, someone that most weeks you feel like could be a reliable C, if you're just like, my VC sputtered it and I don't know what to do, Josh is more likely than not to be a pretty safe option through there. So if you've got a little bit of cash to splash, you need a premium mid at the back end, and you just need some stability in that midfield, Josh could be the right guy for you. All right, let's diverge into a couple of different options to help you out now. And let's up the risk profile a little bit in your team. My number 7 trade target, Matthias Philippo. He is an intriguing option this week. Scored a 73 last week against Carlton. Got there through a couple of goals. No centre bounce presence in this game. But there's a couple of interesting things. Clearly, they were easing him back in. It's his first game of AFL since that pre-season injury. Outside of training, that's all he's done since 2024. So clearly building him back into that spot rather than burning his tank, which was already on the growing and developing side rather than destined and arrived. But what I like about Matthias as an option here is it accesses a couple of 100,000 nearabouts anyway off a Caleb Daniel to all of a sudden go and correct another issue, go and upgrade off somewhere else and probably get comparable scoring. So I think that's important. But he comes into a matchup against the West Coast Eagles this week. While not as gravy as it had been in the first 5 weeks of the year for inside mids, it's still relatively favourable. And I could see Mateus just spending a little bit more time through there with a player like a Boxall, who's done okay in the last couple of weeks. It wouldn't shock me to see Box drift to the vest this week, and someone like Mateus play more of a mid-forward role. Get a Mason Wood back into the side, can play a bit more of a mid-wing role. So we might just see a little bit of growth and development through there. It doesn't have to be this week, but if, again, you're trying to access some of that cash off a player like a Caleb Daniel, this could be a play. If you don't have a lot of cash and you're trying to jump up off a player like a Lindsay through your midfield, or Moraes through your midfield, you're like, oh, I only got a couple of 100K I can put on top of them. Well, Philippo, should I say, is probably the sort of guy you should be looking at. So I like Philippo. I think he's a play. It's a good matchup this week. Next week's fine too. But if you're cash strapped or trying to get some cash out of a player like a Caleb Daniel, then Philippo could be in the pocket for you. My number 8 trade target is a guy I actually am bullish on in a couple of weeks' time, but it could still be decent this week. My number 8 trade target is Max Holmes. Was given plenty of time and space without Toby Bedford on the weekend just gone. And he, like other running machines at Geelong, were able to really capitalise and put on a decent score. I think this might be near the basement of what he's going to get down to us. He's already sitting in that mid-90s average. I think that's probably what he's going to be over most of the year. But we've seen some high highs this year of 120, 130s, and we've seen some 60s and 70s out of Holmes. And it just really depends on the amount of attention he gets given. I think the positive thing for Max is Bailey's running power is so strong that teams are starting to almost go, geez, we got to shut that down. As good as Max is, he's more of a burst type, whereas Bailey just doesn't stop. The concern I have for being super bullish this week is he's got a Port Adelaide matchup this week, and then it's the Bulldogs the following week, and neither are favourable for inside mids, and neither are super favourable for kind of the scoring through transition either. So I don't think it's great, but straight after that, it's Eagles, it's Suns and Bombers, and it's good in that regards for them. But here's the thing, right? One of the keys to success in AFL Fantasy is always be a week ahead of the hunting pack. Maybe you made a move this week to trade out of a Caleb Daniel. You're ahead of the hunting pack, right? So maybe this is the week where you go, you know what? Port aren't a great matchup, but we still can see teams score okay. Max might be the guy. They might put that attention on Bailey. I'll take the plunge. The risk isn't higher because of where he's average and what I'm paying for. He's not a 950, 1 million. It's just over 900K. I'll take the risk. And that could be perfectly valid and perfectly fine to do. So I think it's a play. It's why he's in the top 10. My sweet spot is in 2 weeks. But he's that good of a player that you could go there. Last 2 players, spend a little bit more in your back line, but my number 9 trade target is Jack Sinclair. His break even would suggest you can wait the week, but the matchup, again, Eagles this week could just be enough for you to go, you know what? I'm going to go for a guy that has got the decent history here, that if St Kilda control the corridor, control the game style and the game tempo, we know Jack can really dominate. Now, he's not the one would where they're always funneling the ball through him like previous seasons. Clearly, him and Naz are sharing that role. But he's a guy that we've seen already this year has some sincerely good ceiling about him. And to get someone that we know is basically a 100 averaging defender at under that 950,000, that's got a favourable buy. Yes, it's not the cheapest he could be at, if average versus break even is your guide. But this week's matchup could just be enough. Maybe you're like, that's it. I'm jumping off a Riley Bice type. Not saying that's what you should do, but using a name as illustrative purpose. A couple of 100K, Bice to Sinclair, done. Maybe you're like, I can do Daniel to Philippo, and now I can do Bice to Sinclair, and I feel like I've improved my team and my buy structure's better off as a result. Great. That's fine. I think he still needs to be in the mix. He has to be considered. Not as dominant over the last month, but he started the year on fire. I really do like Jack still as a fantasy prospect at that price point. And while we're continuing our ode to St Kilda, why don't I wrap up my number 10 trade target with another Saint, Rowan Marshall. He's going at 105 in his last 3. In the last 5 weeks, there are 2 really easy matchups for rucks. One is Port Adelaide. The second is the West Coast Eagles, and Rowan's clearly back in form. The reason he's not any higher on my trade targets isn't because of what he's doing. It's actually more indicative of what we probably need right now. Is a big surge in the community last week was to get rid of Tom De Koning, And I think if you held, you'd be happy because you got a ton. I think if you traded and went to a Gawn or a Cherry was probably the more popular move, you'd still be happy about it. But if you traded into Roma, you'd be stoked about it. So I don't think if you're a De Koning owner, you're trading this week. I just don't see that, especially with that fixture. But for the coaches that are unique in their lineup and like, I need a ruck this week and I don't want to get up to, I can't afford Gawn, I can't afford Cherry. Where do I go? Well, for the few coaches that need to spend into their ruck division and need to fix up that part of the ground, I got your back, my friend. Rowan Marshall is my number 10 trade target for you. So there it is. That's who I think are the best options this week. Have I named your trade target for the week? If I have, why don't you like this video and then comment below. Let me know, what are the 2 trades you're making this week in AFL Fantasy? We'd love to know. Yeah, if you haven't subscribed to the channel and got the notifications on, make sure you do so. Every single week, we're dropping multiple videos helping you make informed decisions about your AFL Fantasy team. Our strategy session jumps out late Tuesday night that helps you unpack, not just telling you what to do, where to do it, how to do it, but it helps you to learn how you should be approaching your team over these next couple of weeks and months. And then if you play Supercoach on a Wednesday night, we drop a strategy, not a strategy session, a trade target episode, much like this. I'll give you my top 10 trade targets, but for Supercoach. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. We hope it's helped you, and we can't wait to be back talking with you again real soon on the channel about your AFL Fantasy side.